He called her pathetic at her birthday, then his brother defended her, and the family drama exploded. Her boyfriend's outburst sparked a family betrayal. I never thought my 21st birthday would unravel into a war between two brothers, a night that left me torn between loyalty, humiliation, and the bitter sting of doubt. What should have been a carefree celebration has now become the fracture line of my relationship. My boyfriend wants me to sever all contact with his brother, the very man who stepped in when my world tilted on its axis. But that brother, Mark, insists I should walk away from my boyfriend entirely and ask myself what kind of future I imagine with someone like him. Both men are pulling me in opposite directions, and I am stranded in the middle, unsure whose voice to trust, or whether either deserves it. For context, I'm 21, he's 24, and we've been together for 2 years. Long enough to believe I knew him, but short enough that I can't decide whether I've been blinded by youth or by love. Mark, his brother, has been a steady presence throughout our time together, amiable, respectful, someone I always found easy to be around. Never more than that, until now. It all began during my birthday party, a modest gathering at my place with about 20 friends and family. There was music, laughter, too much cheap wine, exactly the sort of imperfect chaos I'd wanted. As the night wore down, most guests drifted off, leaving a smaller, more intoxicated circle. Me, my boyfriend, Mark, and 2 of my girlfriends. Someone suggested the trampoline in the backyard, and soon one of my friends was flipping like an acrobat, landing in a burst of drunken applause. I laughed and said I wished I could do that. She goaded me, and with liquid courage I stumbled onto the mat, tried, and collapsed in a fit of laughter. The others laughed too, except him. My boyfriend's face darkened, his jaw tight as though my clumsy attempt was an act of betrayal. He stood abruptly, muttering, "Effing pathetic." His tone was sharp, simmering with anger. Then, with a venom I hadn't expected, he barked, "We need to talk, now." The backyard went silent. My girlfriends exchanged uneasy glances. Mark's eyes narrowed. And yet, desperate to keep the peace, I forced a weak smile and told them he was just joking. He wasn't. In the bedroom, with the door slammed shut, the mask fell away. His words lashed at me. Drunk idiot, embarrassment, pathetic show-off. He hurled accusations like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. "You made a fool of me out there," he seethed, voice rising with every syllable. He slammed his hand against the dresser, rattling the frame. When I tried to leave, he blocked the door, his body a wall. My breath came shallow, my hands shook. Then came the pounding on the other side. Mark's voice, firm, demanding, "Open the door." The next moments blurred into shouting between them. My boyfriend stormed out, fury spilling into the hallway. Mark pushed past him and found me curled on the bed, tears streaking my face. He didn't ask, he simply said, "Come with me." I obeyed, trembling, desperate to escape the claustrophobic weight of the room. He gathered my friends, made sure they left safely, then flagged down a taxi. My boyfriend stayed behind somewhere in the house, silent now, but his rage still echoed in my skull. In the cab, I wept quietly, too exhausted to speak. Mark kept his eyes forward, jaw set, as though holding himself together for my sake. He called his mother on the way, his voice calm but clipped, relaying just enough of what happened. At his apartment, his roommates offered me a kind of refuge. One lent me clothes. Mark insisted I take his bed while he took the couch. I collapsed into unfamiliar sheets, half ashamed, half relieved, and drifted into a restless sleep. Morning came too soon. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping bitter coffee with Mark and one of his roommates. My eyes were swollen from crying, but his were clear, steady. He asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Has he done this before?" I hesitated, then confessed that yes, my boyfriend had a temper, but never like this, never over something so trivial. Mark shook his head firm. That wasn't trivial. That was unacceptable. Shame tightened my throat. I tried to excuse it. Wondered aloud if maybe I'd said or done something I hadn't realised, drunk as I was. Mark cut me off with a look. No, don't twist yourself into knots trying to justify it. He was out of line. I nodded, cheeks burning, embarrassed that Mark and my friends had witnessed everything. My instinct was to return home, smooth things over, pretend it hadn't happened. I told Mark as much. His expression darkened, not angry, but disappointed. And in that silence between us, a dangerous thought took root. Maybe I was clinging to something already broken. Mark urged me not to rush home. He wanted me to stay just for a while longer, to breathe, to let the fire of last night cool before walking back into the ashes. His words carried both concern and a quiet insistence that unsettled me. Part of me wanted to resist, to prove I wasn't afraid, but exhaustion won. I stayed. The day passed in strange normality. We sprawled on the couch, controllers in hand, laughing at video games and greasy takeout, his roommates creating a bubble of lightness that felt worlds away from the storm I had left behind. For the first time since my birthday began, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like a spectacle. I felt safe. By evening, though, reality pressed in. I had no clothes, no books, and tomorrow's lectures wouldn't wait. I told Mark I had to go. His jaw tightened, but he drove me anyway. When we arrived, he parked and lingered, his hand drumming against the steering wheel. "I don't like this," he muttered. I promised him I'd be fine, that I'd call if anything happened. After a long silence, he nodded, but refused to leave until I was inside. The house was empty. Relief washed over me as I texted Mark to head home. I busied myself cleaning up after the party, clinging to the comfort of order. When my boyfriend returned later, he seemed composed, even casual, as if the night before hadn't happened. I took a chance. "I think we need to talk," I said quietly. He agreed, and we sat together on the couch. My voice shook as I told him that what he said last night wasn't acceptable, and I wanted to understand why. His reply was ice. "I'll explain after you delete Mark's number. You're not speaking to him again." Confusion roared in my head. What does Mark have to do with this? "He disrespected me," he snapped. "He interfered in my relationship. We're cutting ties with him. End of story. Delete it and then we'll talk." I stared at him, my chest tight. He wasn't interfering. He was helping me. You were threatening, and you'd do the same? His face flushed with rage. His voice cracked like a whip, rising until he was shouting, spitting insults at me before storming out the door. The silence afterward was deafening. Hours later, my phone buzzed. "I'm sorry for yelling, but you need to respect what I want if you want the same in return. This can't be one-sided. Delete Mark's number and we'll finish the conversation. Love you." Manipulation wrapped in tenderness, like a blade hidden in velvet. I replied with trembling fingers. "I need time to think. I'll sleep in the spare room. Please, leave me alone tonight." When he finally returned, well past midnight, the door creaked open and light flooded the room. I stirred awake only to see him standing there, silent, his shadow filling the doorway. Then he turned and slammed the door, leaving me with the echo of his presence. Morning brought clarity and another message, this time from Mark. "Hey, hope you're okay. What he did the other night wasn't right. I think you should get out of there for a while. I've talked to a couple of people and it's fine if you crash here until you figure out what you want to do." My heart split in two. On one side, the promise I once believed in, a man I thought I loved, demanding loyalty at the cost of isolation. On the other, his brother, urging me to choose myself, to recognize the violence beneath the surface, to step away before the ground collapsed completely. If I went to Mark's, it could destroy any chance of repairing my relationship. If I stayed, I might destroy myself. And so I stand at this crossroads, staring down two paths, each lined with betrayal, love, fear, and impossible choices. Mark is his brother. Blood should make him loyal, yet he stands on my side. That fact alone is louder than all the shouting of the past week. If even family turns against him, what does that say about the man I've been defending? The realization gnaws at me. And then his mother called. Her voice was soft, heavy with concern, offering comfort I never expected. It startled me, this sudden solidarity. I wanted to believe my boyfriend's cruelty was just temper, a bad habit that might fade, but now I saw how many others had been quietly waiting for the moment it spilled over. The truth is, the name-calling has always been there. At first it was sharp remarks, the kind you swallow to keep the peace. But in the last year, the words have curdled, uglier, nastier, designed not just to sting but to strip me down. Still, I clung to the memories of better days, convincing myself that love balanced the scales, that the good outweighed the venom. Yet, here I am, still trying to measure affection against humiliation. Strangers on the thread pulled no punches. If his own brother sides with you, that should tell you something about his lack of character. The fact that he's trying to cut you off from the one person who shielded you, that's isolation. Get out before words become fists. I read and reread the comment, heat rising in my chest. Because hadn't I already felt it? The looming threat, his body close, his arms swinging wildly while he raged. He never struck me, but his proximity, his gestures, the way his hands cut the air. I had admitted once that it scared me. His reaction, anger, not remorse. Insulting that you'd even think I could hit you, he sneered, as though my fear was an offence to him. Another voice answered that thought in cold certainty. That's the language of abusers. A decent man would say, "I'm sorry, I'll stop." An abuser says you insulted him, because his pride matters more than your safety. I stared at those words, unsettled. Was it really that simple? That common? I had never dared to frame it that way. To me, it had just been a moment of misunderstanding. Now, I wasn't so sure. I wrote an edit, thanking the flood of voices that poured in, more than I could have imagined. The kindness in those strangers' words cracked something open in me. I admitted I had made my decision. I was going to leave. But first, I needed to confess what had happened since I posted. The night after Mark's text, I asked him the question I'd been avoiding. Had my boyfriend ever done this to someone else? The silence before his reply was heavier than the answer itself. Over dozens of messages, the picture sharpened into something I didn't want to see. Yes, there had been another girl. He'd screamed at her in front of others, reduced her to tears, made her small. Friends and family whispered suspicions about darker things, but nothing concrete surfaced until after their breakup. Then, the floodgates opened. On Facebook, she wrote about being hit, spied on, isolated. She said he deleted people from her phone behind her back. She painted him as controlling, cruel, violent. When his family confronted him, he denied the worst, insisting she was lying to cover her own infidelity. He admitted only to yelling, framing it as mutual, as though rage could ever be an even exchange. Slowly, grudgingly, the family accepted his version, at least outwardly. But Mark and his parents never fully believed it. They kept watch. And then Mark revealed something that left me breathless. That ex had called him 6 months into my own relationship. She had begged him, please, watch out for her, help her if it ever happens again. At the time, Mark hadn't been ready to believe his brother capable of physical violence. But still, he promised her. He would keep an eye on me, on any girl who followed. Now I understand why he stepped in that night, why he won't let this go, and why my boyfriend's demand that I cut Mark off entirely isn't just about pride. It's about silencing the one person who knows the truth. Mark didn't sugarcoat it anymore. After what he'd seen at my party, he was convinced my boyfriend's rage would eventually spill into something physical. That, he said, was why he intervened without hesitation. Even if it never escalated to violence, he added, no one deserved to be treated the way I had been. His words settled over me like cold water. For the first time, I didn't argue. I simply agreed. Between what Mark told me and the flood of support from strangers, my conviction solidified. This wasn't a rough patch. This was a warning. I needed to get out. But leaving wasn't simple. My parents lived hours away. The few girlfriends I could call were already juggling their own lives, and I didn't want to drag them into my mess. In the end, Mark's offer was the only lifeline within reach. Looking back, I'm glad I chose it, because what came next could have been far worse if I'd been alone, or with another frightened friend. I had little time to prepare before my boyfriend returned. My hands shook as I stuffed clothes, essentials, and schoolwork into bags. Mark pulled up, and I left a note on the kitchen counter, my pen gouging the paper as I wrote, "I'm leaving. I'll only return to collect the rest of my things. Don't contact me directly. Speak to your mother if you need to." Then I walked out, heart hammering, leaving the life I defended for 2 years sitting in silence behind me. At Mark's place, the first hours were a blur of tears and numb relief. His parents came over with dinner, surrounding me with a warmth I hadn't expected. They told me, gently but firmly, to do what was best for me. Their kindness cracked something open in my chest. These were his parents, and yet they were protecting me. Halfway through dinner, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. I froze. Everyone advised me not to answer. After it rang out, Mark's phone began to vibrate. Then his mother's. Finally, his father picked up. The call wasn't on speaker, but my boyfriend's voice was so loud you could hear the fury bleeding through. His father spoke calmly, urging him to stop. But then the line went dead. Mark glanced at his phone. The texts poured in. Threats, accusations, promises that he was coming for me. "I know she's there. I'm getting her." Mark texted back a single warning. "If you show up and cause trouble, we're calling the police." But the threats didn't stop. 15 minutes later, headlights slashed across the front lawn. Tires chewed up the grass as his car skidded to a stop, nearly taking out the letterbox. He was out before the engine cut, shouting, his voice raw and feral. From the window, I saw him kicking at the garden, spitting my name like a curse. Mark and his father stepped outside. I stayed in the front room with his mother, pulse drumming in my ears. My boyfriend's voice rose, carrying across the yard. "I know you're in there. Come out." When no one moved, he bolted around to the back patio. The screen door rattled under his fists. The solid door wasn't locked. He began striking the flywire, trying to rip it open. "If you don't come out, I'll destroy everything you own. I'll log into your school accounts and ruin you." Mark and his father ran after him, pulling him from the door. Fists flew. From the inside, his mother and I clutched each other, afraid someone would get hurt. Through the glass, I saw his face, twisted, desperate, as he spotted me. His voice cracked. "If you don't get in the car right now, I'll kill myself." His mother reached for her phone. "I'm calling the police." Outside, Mark and his father wrestled him toward the front yard, their bodies a barrier between him and the house. He thrashed, then broke free long enough to shout one last time, but the fight had gone out of him. He staggered to his car, slammed the door, and with a screech of tires tore up the grass before disappearing down the street. The silence afterward felt heavier than the chaos. I stared at the wrecked garden, the torn screen, the faces of the people who had shielded me. His mother's hand shook as she lowered her phone. Mark's father rubbed at the bruises already darkening his arm. I felt a rush of guilt so sharp it made me dizzy. Guilt that his family had to endure this because of me. Guilt that the violence I'd tried to rationalize had now spilled onto their lawn. But even through the guilt, a new feeling rose like a fragile flame. Relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't alone. The police were calm, methodical. They promised they would speak to him, that his behavior at Mark's house wouldn't go unanswered. They gave me advice about applying for a restraining order and made arrangements for me to safely retrieve the rest of my belongings. It felt surreal, like the story of someone else's life. Yet, here I was, taking notes from an officer on how to protect myself from the man I thought I loved. And then, the next blow landed. not in person, but online. He turned to Facebook, unleashing his fury into the void. He accused Mark and me of having an affair, posting grainy, cropped photos of strangers pulled from dark corners of the internet, passing them off as proof. His narrative was wild, venomous, but it spread quickly enough. I refused to reply. Mark refused. His parents, too, held their silence. None of us would dignify it. Still, watching his lies flicker across screens made me feel exposed, as though the world was peering in at me through a cracked window. For now, I'm staying with Mark and his roommates. It remains the safest option. Mark insists I'm never left alone at the house. Either he or his male roommate shadows me, guarding against the possibility that my boyfriend might come back. We've even spoken to Mark's neighbours, who promise to keep watch and call us if his car so much as slowed near the property. Their solidarity eases me, but only just. I keep running through my next steps. Tomorrow, I'll visit campus services to ask about student housing. I'll buy pepper spray. I'll carve out safety where I can. And yet, uncertainty gnaws at me. Should I reach out to his ex, the girl who warned Mark long before this? She might hold answers, or she might only dredge up more chaos. I hesitate, knowing how easily my choices ripple outward. But one thing is certain. I will never go back. That door is closed, bolted. The more I reflect with fresh eyes, the more I see how warped so many of our normal moments were. How I bent myself small, ignored red flags, excused the inexcusable. I don't do that anymore. So, this is where I stand. A little bruised, a little lost, but free. And for everyone who reached out, worried that I might return to him, please, no, that will never happen. The voices that followed. When even his parents tell you leaving was the right choice, believe them. Get that restraining order. He's dangerous, and he won't let this go quietly. Forget his lies on Facebook. Block him. Anyone willing to believe his smears isn't someone you need in your life. Protect yourself first. It may hurt, but for true safety, you may have to cut ties even with the family who stood by you. Unless they sever him completely, you risk being pulled back into his orbit. If they truly care, they'll understand. Choose survival over sentiment. I'm moved beyond words by the way people rallied around you. His brother, his parents, even the ex who once tried to shield you from the same pain. There's something profoundly human about strangers, past and present, forming a circle around one woman. Carry that with you. And with that chorus echoing in my ears, I take my first unsteady steps toward a life that belongs entirely to me.